Welcome to Faith Imperfect with Jessica. This is the reflection and recap of the prequel of The Chosen called The Shepherd, a special Christmas episode. And today I have my sister Jennifer with me. Janice might be joining later.
Hello.
Hi, Jennifer. Did you get a chance to enjoy the beautiful weather today?
I did. I was out a little bit
Me
doing
too.
some running around.
Yeah, it was really nice out. Okay, so the first part of this episode, it starts with a dark screen, and there's a caption there that reads, based on the true story from Luke's Gospel, chapter 2. So the first scene, you see this shepherd, and he has a crutch, and he's traveling on a dirt road with a white lamb that's on a rope leash. And the caption reads that when Augustus Caesar became emperor of Rome, the prophets of Israel had been silent for 400 years. Then you see the shepherd again, and he's still traveling with the lamb. Then it goes back to a captioned screen that says, suffering heavy taxation, the Hebrew people prayed for relief. The Hebrew people prayed for relief from the Roman occupation, and priests repeatedly read the old prophecies aloud in synagogues. You see this shepherd with his lamb, and there are other shepherds ahead of him saying, come on, Simon. So I did catch that in the caption. I didn't hear it, but did you caught that too?
Yes.
And so they actually pause and they're waiting for him to catch up, but he never really catches up, and then they keep moving forward. And then the caption reads that the prophecies whispered of a coming Messiah who would save God's people. So then you see all the shepherds, they get to a well, and there's women there, and the women kind of start leaving, and one of the shepherds is like, come on. And Simon finally gets up there with his sheep, and he fills his water jug, and when he leaves the well, you see a sign that says Bethlehem in the direction that he's going.
When I was watching this part of the episode, I was thinking to myself, what exactly is happening here with these lambs and sheep? And I mean, it does kind of tell you later, but I really wanted to pause it right there and go and read the Gospel of Luke, and I never did. I completely forgot about it until you just reiterated that part.
Well, Luke 2, 1-18 is more of the birth of Jesus, and I can still read a synopsis from that. But yeah, a lot of the Bible studies I look at don't have much information on this prequel. I only found one. And it has a few things. So this next part, well, before he gets to Bethlehem, you hear a man reading this excerpt from the scroll of the prophet Micah. And it's like a really short little blip. The only one I could find, I thought, was these two verses. It says, but you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. I guess I could read the rest of it. There's actually a verse 4 that says, he will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. So I guess there was a lot of different prophecies they were reading even before the birth. So you see the shepherd taking his lamb through the market, and this is what Jennifer was referring to. They're like turning their sheep in, and you hear something about no blemishes, and I don't know if they were selling them. I don't think they were. And when this shepherd Simon, gets up there, his sheep is getting inspected by a Pharisee. Simon says, teacher, I have a question about the Messiah. I have studied Torah every day. And before he can finish, he gets interrupted by the Pharisee who says, a shepherd wants to learn? And then he's like, yes, do you believe the Messiah will set us free from the occupation? And the Pharisee says, yes, he will make a great military leader. And then Simon asks him, are you sure? Just because last Shabbat, the priest read from the prophet Ezekiel, and he did not say, and then before he could finish his sentence, the Pharisee, I think it was a Pharisee, I really don't know, it was some kind of religious leader, says, how dare you? And then another shepherd interrupts and says, I'm sorry, teacher, he's obsessed. And the Pharisee says that the lamb that they brought is not spotless, and shows them that there's a blood stain on its leg, which was not there when they were at the well. He goes on to say that these are for righteous men, for the perfect sacrifice. And then he goes on with, you wonder why the Messiah doesn't come, people like you keeping him away with your stains. If you come back here without a perfect lamb, I will banish you all from the marketplace. So not just the one shepherd, Simon, but all his group of shepherds that he was with. He'd banish all of them.
I got the feeling when the Pharisees said, a shepherd who wants to learn, that he was being sarcastic, but the shepherd was being earnest and responding back like, yeah, I do want to learn. to me, I'm going to call him a Pharisee as well because I felt like he was dressed like one. The Pharisee had a look on his face like it almost did kind of remind me of sarcasm. And then, of course, the shepherd looked genuinely interested in asking this question. And I was kind of surprised by the blood stain on the leg, too. And it got me wondering, well, did the lamb hurt itself all of a sudden? It was interesting.
Yeah, and when I watched it, I was thinking when I first watched it, like, that lamb was perfect his whole trip there. How did that happen, you know? And then I started getting suspicious, like in my mind, trying to replay it, and I kept thinking, oh, he turned away. Did he put something on the lamb to make it look like a stain? But I told myself, don't start judging already, right? And so when I rewatched it, I don't think he actually ever does turn, but I noticed they had all the sheep or the lambs in like a pen, and he picked them up out of there. And I think once he picked the lamb up out of there, you could kind of see there was something on the arm. And then as he's holding him, he's kind of looking at him, and it almost just looked like dirt. But then later you see that it's a little spot. Yeah. But you never see that when the lamb gets hurt. But yeah, I felt he was very rude. Like he didn't think it was worth his time to give the shepherd an answer to his question, is almost what it felt like, too.
It did feel that way.
Yeah. Like he was being disregarded. So the other shepherds tell him when they walk away that he didn't listen to them. They tell him to take his runt back up the hill and to try to keep up with them. They tell him they're not going to wait for him, and if he doesn't hurry, that he's going to have to find his way back on his own. He ends up falling down in the marketplace and scratches his arm, and doesn't look like anybody tries to help him up either. And while he's on the ground kind of cleaning it off, he hears someone reading from the scrolls. So he gets up and then he goes to that area and he stands in the doorway listening. And while he's holding the lead for his lamb, so the lamb is still outside, his arm is dripping blood on the floor of the space that they're in. And there's a man that's there that sees him and tells him that he needs to go. And when he says he wants to listen, the man says, no, this is a holy place. You're filthy, go. And the man cleans up the blood after the shepherd leaves. I even felt like, didn't he kind of almost even push him? I don't know. I kind of felt like that happened too.
Yeah, I do think he sort of pushed him out a little. Yeah, I guess I was surprised by that comment. But then I do remember you saying in previous podcasts that they like to be clean before they enter a place of worship like that. So I guess as much as I can be surprised by it, maybe I shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I wonder if it was, even if he was clean as far as like no dirt on him, I wonder if they still would have treated him like that because he was a shepherd. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In the same way that maybe the woman at the well was talking about being unclean because of her ways, maybe that clean was also referring to the shepherd as a shepherd.
Yeah. Yeah, because I noticed the whole time it seemed like there was a lot of just disrespect or something toward them. So the man clears up the blood after the shepherd leaves. When Simon's outside, he kind of pauses. Once he continues on, he runs into a man that's taking his pregnant wife through the square. I recognized him right away as Joseph from season 1.
I did not recognize Mary's face.
Yeah, I think Mary was a completely different actress. I just want to say that. So once he continues on, he runs into the man that I said that looks like Joseph from season 1. Joseph asks where the nearest well is, and that his wife, which we can assume is Mary, hasn't had a drink for hours. Simon tells him where it is, but also offers his water for her to drink. So Joseph thanks the shepherd for his kindness numerous times. Simon the shepherd asks where they came from, and when Joseph says Nazareth, he says, I wouldn't say that too loud, because people say nothing good can come from Nazareth. Joseph says that he knows what they say, and then Simon says that he won't tell anyone, that the secret's safe with me. And then Mary smiles as she kind of covers up her pregnant belly with her scarf, which I don't know why that would have to be, if that's the secret, or if the secret was that they're from Nazareth. Probably from Nazareth, I'm guessing.
I felt like she had to hide her pregnancy here.
Yeah. But it made me wonder why. Nobody knows. Yeah. I kind of, yeah.
I mean, nobody came out and said that. That was the impression that I got, just because of the way she covered her stomach.
Yeah, and it also kind of made me wonder if it was like, not that they were against that kind of thing back in the day, but maybe you were more private and modest about it. I thought that she was trying to hide it too.
Yeah, there was a Bible study I did at our church that was talking about the different Marys. So it had like Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, another Mary. I think it was like 3 different Marys. And so when they talked about the mother of Jesus, they were saying, and I didn't know this, like back in those days when someone was going to get married, there was like this whole thing they would do where, I'm trying to remember the tradition. It was like he would make up a house for them, but she would stay with with her parents, and they would be engaged for like, I want to say it was like a year. And then at the year mark, he would go get her. If everything was fine, like she wasn't pregnant and stuff, they would have like this little parade type thing back to the house where they're going to now live. And so it was like a way to make sure that they stayed pure during that time. And so obviously Mary and Joseph had to forego that. And so I think there was some hiding they had to do. I remember just thinking, reading some of that stuff, that it had to be scary because people would get stoned or over stuff like that. So for them to be traveling, she was probably already not wanting to advertise that she was pregnant. But I just keep thinking, well, if you're traveling to some other city and people don't know you, how are they going to know that you're not married or that you weren't married before you had this baby?
I had a hard time when I jumped in trying to figure out where you guys were. And then when you started talking about how Mary was on the horse and she was thirsty, then I was like, okay, because there are certain parts that I do have a lot to say, but you haven't gotten to them yet. So,
Okay. So then all of a sudden, a Pharisee rudely is walking past and says, "Out of my way," and practically knocks Simon the shepherd down. And then Joseph says, "We must go." And he's kind of earnest about, let's get out of here. So him and Mary leave. The next scene is a Pharisee in that same holy place that the man was in, the same one, reading from the scroll. And he's saying a pretty long quote from Isaiah 35, 3 through 6. It says, "Strengthen the weak hands and make firm the feeble knees. Say to those who have an anxious heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, with the recompense of God. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute shall sing for joy." And then he says that it's a reading from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, which is from Isaiah 35, 3 through 6. The next scene is at night. The shepherds are all at their camp and they're around a fire, and the sheep are grazing. The shepherd Simon finally arrives. The other shepherds tell him that he's finally back and to stay with the sheep. One of them asks the other, "He's useless. Why do you keep him around?" And the other one says, "He's a good boy." When he finally reaches the campfire, he asks if he can have his dinner now, and one of them says, "Not with us. Your plate is over there." Another one tells him, "After what happened this morning, you sleep with the sheep tonight." And then they tell him to pay attention and to watch for wolves. One of them even says that a Roman took one of their sheep and cooked it right in front of him. Another says, "Oh, they're talking about Romans again," and you can tell he's sick of hearing about it. And he says, "You're lucky, Simon, that you're not part of this conversation with Romans being talked about it again and again." So Simon makes his way down the hill. He gets to a stream and washes his hands and his face, and he's cleaning his arm that he scratched in the marketplace. And then when he gets up, as he's getting up, the wind picks up, and it picks up so much that all the torches and even the campfire go out. You hear ambient noise, and you see some flashing lights that are reflecting on the shepherds' faces, but you really can't hear anything specific. At least I couldn't. And there's no captioning that reads anything. But you know that they're seeing something amazing. Some of them are dropping to their knees. Some of them are putting their face to the ground. Simon's observing from a distance, and he's still leaning on his crutch. But you could tell his face isn't as lit up, but he's seeing whatever they're seeing. And all of a sudden, everything goes dark, and you only hear them breathing. And then Simon kind of gets excited and starts moving. And then you see the rest of the shepherds like rejoicing and hugging and all this.
When I was seeing the flashing lights, I thought I was hearing something in the background. It was a weird, almost like maybe kind of like voices, but not coherent. And
Yeah, I felt like that too. Almost like whispering. Like,
yeah,
you know, but and it didn't sound bad. It's just you couldn't make out
right,
what it was.
right. And I assumed that this was the Star of Bethlehem that was shining over the birth of Jesus.
Yeah, well, and before that, before the star, I think appears, and actually we'll have to, when I read it, we'll see. But because I didn't reread it, I know that there's a point where there's angels that appear to the shepherds, and they tell them, they say some stuff to them. So I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't try to do that, but I guess maybe people would get upset by that if they didn't portray it right. I don't know. So this is kind of the way they did it. I feel like they're leaving it up to our imaginations
Yeah.
as to what's going on. If someone never knew the story and was watching, they'd be like, well, what's happening? You know? And I'm surprised that they wouldn't have tried to fill that in a little bit as to what happened, at least put the reading like they were before when they had talked about Caesar Augustus and different things, like at least put that on the screen so people know what's happening. Because if you didn't know, you'd be like, what's going on?
I think they want to encourage people to read those passages of the Bible at least. And then if you did go back and read that passage about the angels that do talk to the shepherds, then you can make the assumption that that whispering was the angels talking to the shepherds.
I think it was still fairly loud. Like they made I think there was some music, there was some ambient noise, and definitely like the lights. I guess I could just go ahead and read from Luke 2. It says, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria." I almost said Quintus. "And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David." So that's why they had to go to Bethlehem, because they were from the line of David. "He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married and was expecting a child. While they were there," so they really technically weren't married yet then. She was pledged to be married, but I don't think they were yet. "While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said, 'Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger.' Suddenly a great company of heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, 'Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests.' When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, 'Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about.' So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart." So it actually sounds like an angel appeared, and then almost like the heavens opened up, and like it must have been that was all the flashing maybe. And that's why I was like, oh, they're not going to go more into it. But how would you perceive it? How would you, or not perceive it, but how would you illustrate that?
I
I don't
agree.
know.
There probably would have been some people who would have been upset by that, probably. And I do think that leaving it up to your own imagination, I think that does add some value to it. And I think it was good.
Yeah. I do think it was good too. It definitely made me want to read, well, what did they say to him? I don't remember. Or what did they say to the shepherds, you know?
Same here.
You definitely see that they're impacted by it for sure. So next you see Simon quickly moving with his crutch. It's still dark out. He eventually starts running and at some point even drops the crutch. The scenes go back and forth between Mary giving birth and the shepherd running. You hear a voice, it sounded like a pretty deep voice too, saying, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son." Simon then reaches the stable where Mary and Joseph are, and he sees through the cracks in the wall that the baby's being handed to Mary by Joseph. The voice continues, and it says, "And shall call his name Emmanuel." And that's from Isaiah 7:14. The baby cries, and then the other shepherds catch up to Simon the shepherd. They all enter the stable. Joseph stops them until he realizes that they mean no harm. Now during this, I believe there was just music playing, so you couldn't hear what was actually happening. You don't actually hear what they're saying, but they look like they're talking, and maybe even, I'm assuming, telling Joseph what they saw and what was said to them in the pasture. And then Joseph seems to motion like, come see the baby. So he hesitates, but he eventually hands the baby to Simon the shepherd. And then you hear them talking, and they say, "Oh, he's so beautiful. We must tell someone." And then they say, "We must tell everyone." And they say thank you, and the other shepherds leave while Simon is still holding Jesus. Simon tells Joseph that they have waited so long for this. And then Joseph, as he's handing the baby back to Mary, Mary's like, his arm. And you're thinking it's the baby, but Mary's telling Joseph that Simon's arm was bleeding or whatever. And so Mary gives Joseph a part of the cloth that the baby was wrapped in, and Joseph hands it to Simon, and he wraps his arm. And then Simon asks, "What are you going to name him?" And they say, "Jesus." And then Simon's like, "People must know." And so you see the shepherds going around the town at night telling everyone. You don't hear again what they're saying. Instead, you hear a voice speaking. And it's saying that part of Isaiah 9:6-7. To us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. Another shepherd hugs Simon the shepherd and says, you were right all along. And then you see the Pharisee, and he calls Simon and says, you, I told you not to come back here, so where is it? Have you found a spotless lamb for sacrifice? And then the shepherd smiles, and the episode ends.
I just wanted to say, okay, I was confused because when Simon was running towards the stable, the voiceover, in the background that we were all hearing said that they shall call him Emmanuel. But when Simon asked, what will you call him? Mary said, Jesus. That part totally confused me. So can someone elaborate on that?
Yeah, I wanted to look that up because I was trying to remember. Emmanuel, the Hebrew origins, translates to God is with us.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
I was just going to say that it was part of that scripture in Isaiah 7, right? Did they call him Emmanuel or one of the Isaiahs that you just read? And that always confused me. I've heard it before, but I never looked up the origin, but that makes sense that it would mean that God is with us.
Yeah, and then that's the other thing too is I know it's confusing, but yeah, they call him Jesus and also Emmanuel, and then all those other names, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, that's all supposed to be like other names too that technically, are him.
Touching a little bit on the topic of Simon running through the field, I started to wonder, and I know it probably was supposed to represent that that part of the scroll that you heard earlier in the episode that a lame shepherd leaps like a deer, or I forgot exactly how it was worded, but I was wondering, is this kind of the first miracle of Jesus being on the earth? Although there were miracles, I believe, performed through Noah and Moses.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they do say that's so actually it's interesting because we'll talk about that in the next episode, but a lot of the stuff in the Old Testament, Moses did a lot of miracles, did a lot of things, and so some of the scriptures were trying to point that this next person coming, the Messiah, was going to be greater than Moses because everybody felt like Moses was in such high regard because of all the stuff he did. And they were trying to say that the Messiah is going to be even greater than Moses. Because, yeah, Moses did do a lot of them. Now, obviously, this story isn't in the Bible for this shepherd with the lame leg, but we do know that they say that there's so many healings and things that could have happened that aren't recorded. Who knows? Something like that could have possibly happened.
And also, I was kind of wondering your opinions on, did you think there was supposed to be some kind of significance of him bleeding on that floor? Because when his blood dropped on that floor, I felt like something was supposed to happen with that or come out of that. I don't know, just the way it happened, and then the way the person in there, do we call it a temple?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if it was an actual temple. I know it was like a tent, and they turned it into a holy place, so it could have maybe been a version of a temple.
So the guy that was kind of pushing him out of the holy tent, we'll say, cleaned up that blood. I don't know. I just felt like there was supposed to be some significance to that. I guess things are added to shows for whatever reason, but I felt like there should have been more of a reason. So when nothing came out of that, I was a little bit surprised, unless it just was sort of driving the point home about the whole unclean thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jennifer. I was really expecting there to be something there, something that was going to happen with that or come of that. But then when I seen them just clean it up and they just went on with their business, I thought maybe there wasn't any significant thing. But I thought that too.
I don't know if there was. I was trying to see, because you asked me that question. I remember watching it, and then you had watched it, and you asked me that before we did the podcast or before we were recording. And I remember when I watched it, I was trying to really pay attention because I wondered if it was a parallel thing of while that reading was happening. Could it have been a parallel to like something with bleeding?
Okay.
And he's bleeding on the floor. But because he was getting told, leave, you're filthy and all this, I couldn't hear like what the guy was reading at that point. And I remember trying to like read, and I think it was from Micah, those two verses. And I don't think there was anything that jumped out at me, but I wondered if it was something like that, where there was like a parallel meaning of something from there.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't get it. Sometimes when I'm watching stuff, I don't necessarily divide my attention to see what else is going on in the background. So probably if there was something like that being said, I probably missed it as well.
Yeah, because I was trying to think. I thought he was talking about. I think it almost sounded like it was some military stuff. I couldn't remember what it was. Yeah, see, I don't see it in that one, so it's probably not from Micah. Let me see if my notes show where he was talking. But there was a part of me that did think that whole thing of him, he's unclean as far as you could say, okay, he had dirt on his skin and dirt on his face. He had fallen on the ground, remember? So he had more dirt on him even from that. And then the fact that he's a shepherd and he's in there. And then on top of it, now he's bleeding there. So I don't think he was considered necessarily unclean in the sense of where they would not touch him. You know how they were treating like the lepers and stuff?
Right.
I don't think they were thinking of him like that. But yeah, I don't know if there was a significance. And they didn't have any roundtable discussions for this prequel.
Okay.
I guess it's kind of left up to our own imagination. Do you have any theories on that? What were you expecting to happen, I guess? Maybe that's the question.
Yeah, that is a good question because I'm not really sure I was really expecting something, or I don't know that I was expecting something specific, but I felt like I was expecting something to come out of that. I don't know what.
I guess I was kind of expecting because up until this point, we've seen so many miracles happen that I thought since he entered a holy place that his wound was going to be healed when he walked into it.
I thought that when Mary gave him the cloth from Jesus and wrapped his arm, I thought, oh, is he going to unwrap his arm and 5 minutes later it's healed?
Yes.
But they never showed anything.
Yes. I did also think that too. But getting back to like when Jennifer was talking about the blood dripping on the floor, I thought, okay, that's going to be like maybe another healing thing that we see, another miracle. And then when they were like pushing him out, I was like, oh, okay, nothing happened there.
Well, as you were talking, Janice, I was rereading, and I was because I was skimming trying to find that part in here to see what the guy was saying, if I had caught which part of the Bible or which part of the scroll, which would equate to some chapter out of the Bible, what it pertained to. I was rereading that part about them inspecting the lamb for their sacrifice and how it had that spot on it. And he says that it wasn't spotless. What did he say though? I guess he just says a blemish, that it had a blemish. That, yeah, it had to be spotless and it had a blemish. And so I guess we could kind of think about when he entered that holy place, he technically had a blemish, if you think about it. And that lamb had a little bit of blood on it, and he had blood. So was it a parallel that, not that he's like a lamb, but, well, he is like a sheep. If we think about Jesus as like our shepherd, he's a sheep that's going to follow the shepherd. And he has a blemish, and maybe, and the way they're treating him too, I just felt like, I don't know. So maybe it's supposed to be a parallel. I don't really know what else it could have been.
No, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I have to say I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to just throw something in too, since we were at the end of that episode, kind of backing up when Simon finally made it back to the camp with that sheep that wasn't good enough for anybody. And everybody was kind of sitting around the fire and they were eating. And Simon was like, can I get some food? I was shocked at how they treated him. Like, no, your plate's over there. Well, really, he didn't have a plate. He just went back down the hill and cleaned himself up in the little river or whatever. And I thought, that took him longer to get there than the rest of them because he had a gimp leg and he had a sheep, that he was, or a lamb that he was traveling with. So he had to have been exhausted to like get back and be treated that way and not be able to eat. I don't know. I felt bad for him. Kind of like I felt bad for like Matthew and like the other episodes. I was like, wow, that was mean.
Yeah, I think it also though kind of shows like, well, by him and and even then his lamb did look perfect all the way up until he had it in that marketplace. But because he gave them a spotless lamb, then that Pharisee was like kind of retaliating against their whole group, saying, I'm going to banish all of you from the marketplace. So maybe that was like his way of getting punished by the other shepherds to say, don't do that again, but it still did seem kind of harsh because you think that they would stick by each other,
Right. That makes sense.
They're all kind of treated that way. But it did also sound like in the episode they were trying to tell him, you didn't listen to us. Because I bet you And I wondered if it was gonna I feel like he agitated the Pharisee by asking and questioning the answer. If he would have kept his mouth closed about that whole thing, asking about the Messiah being a warrior and kind of challenging the Pharisee, would he have accepted the lamb? But if the lamb truly did have that stain on it, then he probably wouldn't have. I don't know.
I was just going to say, I'm curious. I know that this was like a bonus episode and it was only 15 or 20 minutes long, but I feel like it can continue just on that bonus episode. And I'm curious if they're going to have another bonus episode to kind of reflect back to that time and continue on to that story, because it's making me wonder if eventually Simon's sheep becomes flawless and if the people in the village finally accept it. I don't know. It was just a thought.
So far through all the seasons I've watched, I've never seen that. Now, there are a couple other Christmas episodes. I didn't realize until I went to go look this up that there's a couple other ones. I don't know if they're technically season 1, and I didn't watch them because I was kind of running behind with looking up all this stuff. And there are some other episodes in there, but I don't know. But I also do know that, like, once the sheep is perfect, if they accept it, it's going for sacrifice anyway. I mean, not that I'm downplaying that now, but I
Right.
don't know.
Well, and I guess another thing
Yeah.
that I was thinking, the only thing that made me think of that, because the episode ended with that, was that gentleman like a Pharisee?
That's what we're guessing. We didn't really know. He seemed like some kind of religious leader.
Right. So he questioned him at the end of that episode and said, I told you not to come back here. Have you brought me, how did he word it? Have you brought me a spotless lamb?
He said, so where is it at? Have you found a spotless lamb for sacrifice?
Yeah. And then Simon kind of thought about it and then he smiled and the episode ended. So it made me wonder, will they continue on with something with that? I felt like they kind of left it hanging in the clouds, that there might have been a follow-up to that, but
I interpreted it that he found Jesus and Jesus was the lamb.
okay. Yes. Wow, that's crazy. Like, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, that's where the smile came from. It's all coming to me now. Yeah. Okay.
So I found something interesting. This one Bible study I was looking at was talking about Ezekiel 34:20 verses 23 through 24. Says, I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them, and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. When I looked up that verse in the Bible, it said that the one shepherd, David, they talked about that there was going to be somebody from the line of David. And that's kind of goes back into this whole thing of like Joseph was going to Bethlehem, which is where David is from, because their family is from the line of David. So Jesus is from the line of David. So they're trying to like say that that's like a parallel to Jesus coming from the line of David. And so that Jesus is the shepherd that will tend to the flock of sheep, which would be like all of us. I don't know. I guess I just thought I would read that because I didn't find any excerpts in this episode about it, but they had it for this one Bible study, and I thought it was pertinent. Some of the questions it asks, it says, what is the significance of the beginning story of Jesus featuring a lame shepherd? What do you guys think? Why do you think they picked a lame shepherd for the beginning of the story?
Are you talking about the shepherd that was walking around with the lamb?
Yeah,
okay,
lame means like he's got a bad leg or a bum leg or something.
Because I feel like from what I've seen, that here Simon has a problem with his leg, but he still walks around. He still tries to work. He offered Mary that water. He gave his water up. So that shows that he's got his own problems, but yet he's still willing to help others. And I felt like maybe he picked him because he's a good man and maybe something good is going to come of him.
I actually, when you were reading that question, was reminded of the quote from Tiny Tim when he said, when he was talking to his dad in church about feeling inspired because it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. And I think that it can kind of translate here as well.
When I read the question, the things I thought about, I put down that you could see that this guy was struggling. He still had faith though, because he was saying, I read Torah every day, but he was also always getting rejected. So I feel like all of those things play into it because Jesus and the disciples all end up struggling. They all obviously have faith and they all get rejected to some degree, whether it's before and or after following Jesus. So I don't know. I just kind of felt like it went right in line with everything else, the struggles and the hardships and the stuff they go through being followers, but yeah, I think they're all good answers. When it said, what is the attitude of the people toward the shepherds? I didn't think it was very nice. Did you guys catch on to that too then?
I also caught on to that and thought not only is it not nice, but, because he was, crippled, I felt like he got the brunt of it as well.
Yeah, like even more than the other shepherds got, right?
Yes.
The cool thing that I thought was that he was so rejected throughout the whole episode, but I felt like he was given the gift at the end by he was the only shepherd that got to hold Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought that that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
And you could tell that he really appreciated that.
He kind of reveled in it a little bit.
Yes.
Did you guys catch on when you were listening to any of the stuff do you have any impact that hearing these prophecies about the Messiah read in the synagogues before Jesus came? I wouldn't have caught on to it if it wasn't for the captions saying that they were repeating those prophecies in the synagogues. Did you catch on to any of that during the scenes?
Only because of the captioning.
Okay,
So I probably
same.
wouldn't have caught
Yeah.
it without that.
And I was going to say, I never actually caught on to that because I can't figure out how to turn the captioning on when I'm watching these episodes. I watch them on my phone through the actual chosen website, and I can't figure out how to do the captioning on it yet.
I think when you have the video up, if you see the little gear symbol and you click it, I think you can turn it on. Because I watched it on my phone these last 2 days because everyone's been home with earbuds, and I had the caption on. So you might want to look at that next time. It said there was 2 other questions, and then we'll probably end the episode. What special details were present in the video that amplified your understanding of this event? I didn't catch anything that I thought amplified anything. I didn't know if you guys had anything.
The only thing I thought that amplified it was when they were in the field and those flashing lights were going off. To me, that was really represented a big deal.
Yeah, I guess them dropping to their knees and putting their face to the ground. It did seem like, wow.
Yeah. And I thought the cool thing was they never showed what they were looking at, but they all looked so shocked and mesmerized. And like Jennifer said earlier, it's kind of, you could leave it up to your own imagination on what they saw.
Yeah, and then go read your Bible, and then you can kind of even picture more, right?
Yeah.
I think you're right. They wanted the viewers to focus on that part. And then was there anything that inspired you or touched you from the episode?
My favorite part was the end because, again, throughout the whole thing, Simon's being pushed around. He's rejected. And when he approached baby Jesus and Joseph handed him to him so he could hold him, it was like all of that kind of just went away. And he was just so appreciative and grateful that he got to hold this holy baby. I loved that part.
I was going to reference the same thing, that I found it inspirational that Joseph handed Jesus to Simon. I think that was probably the most inspirational part of this episode for me.
Yeah, I liked it because I like to hold babies. I know you do too, Jennifer. But the baby was really cute too. But yeah, just imagining being able to hold him, I couldn't imagine how he felt. It kind of makes you wonder if all those episodes where people like Fatina finally looking in Jesus's eyes and realizing who he is, do you get that feeling just from did he get that feeling just from holding the baby? But he already knew and he believed, so that maybe that's all that needed to be there. Yeah, I thought it was good. I am curious about the other Christmas episodes.
What do you suppose the other Christmas episodes are about? Because to me, it made sense that this one would be the Christmas episode because Christmas is the day that Jesus was born. So what could they possibly, I'd have to look that up. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm real curious. One of them said the messengers. So maybe it's different points of view. You had the shepherds and maybe the 3 wise men. Maybe it's someone else's point of view.
Interesting.
Because there were different groups that had different things happen around the time that he was born. So we'll have to find out. So thank you guys for joining, and thanks for listeners for listening. And we'll see you next time with season 2, episode 1 called Thunder. And we'll end with a prayer. The Lord's my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the paths for his name's sake. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.